One problem facing people at many levels of business is how to make time for a work life and a personal life. Do you find that one seems to keep getting in the way of the other? This is the Work-Life Balance with Rick Morris. Even if you're not involved in the business world, you'll have a lot to gain by tuning in to today's show. Now, here is your host, Rick Morris.
Oh, resume here. Oh, good. That's great. Okay, I see that. Now it's not letting me go live. So
all right, less than 30 seconds.
All right. It is not letting me take it go live. So we may not.
The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
One problem facing people at many levels of business is how to make time for a work life and a personal life. Do you find that one seems to keep getting in the way of the other? This is the Work-Life Balance with Rick Morris. Even if you're not involved in the business world, you'll have a lot to gain by tuning in to today's show. Now, here is your host, Rick Morris.
And welcome to another edition of the Work-Life Balance. We're so excited to have you guys here on a Friday. We're going to have a fantastic show for you. And for once, I don't announce the long list of travel that I endured for the previous week. Got to be home. Had probably one of the coolest Halloween experiences I've had. I got attacked. Only super geeks will know this one, but I got attacked by 4 kids dressed as Dwight Schrute from The Office. And boy, were they in character, and man, did they make me laugh. And so that part was amazing. So Halloween here, we literally bus in thousands of children, went through 600 pounds of candy. So it's just a great time. So wanted to make sure that I was home for that. So hopefully everybody had a safe and awesome Halloween, if that's something that you guys do. So let's get into today's guest and show. My guest is a soul-inspiring thought leader, CEO and intuitive executive coach, international best-selling author, sought-after speaker, podcast host. She works with stuck and stressed leaders worldwide, helping them to sail through their obstacles with resilience. Bringing over 25 years experience, CEOs, entertainment executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders seek her help for a unique strategic edge, guiding them and their teams both professionally and personally while growing their individual intuition. She helps them clear blocked areas of their lives to allow for profound inner satisfaction, deeper significance in their lives, expanded resilience, and a reignited clarity of their own higher purpose. Her unique healing modalities include her own soul transformational blueprint and transmission of healing codes through light language, both which offer life-changing experience that speaks to your soul to expand and up-level your life. And when I heard that, I was like, this is absolutely somebody we have to have on the show. I gotta find out what all this means. That's a lot of big words, and you guys know me well. So we're going to bring her to the show. Let's welcome Lara Jaye. How are you, Lara?
Hey, Rick. How are you? Good.
So excited to have you. So let's just peel it back. Let's peel the onion first. What is an intuitive, right? I know thousands of executive coaches, but what's an intuitive executive?
So first of all, I want to say that every single one of us are intuitive. We can all be intuitive. It's just at what level are we willing to open up to listen to our sixth sense, or for lack of a better word, God, our source, spirit, whatever it is that you relate to. But it's at what level the intuitive person opens up to that. And I didn't used to always be that open, but I am now. So.
No, and it's perfect timing, certainly for me as well, because I've spoke over the last 2 to 3 years on this show about that personal growth journey and
Yeah.
things, the expansion of things that I didn't recognize. One of those in learning how to build the connection between subconscious and conscious, right?
Yes.
Once you start to go down that path, it's incredible. And if you do open up your mind, what actually can come in?
Absolutely. But we have to get quiet long enough and turn the radio off and the TV and video games and whatever else in order to hear that. It doesn't just show up.
But
I
you
mean, it's
just named
always
like
there.
3 of my
Mhm.
favorite things.
I'm
So
sorry.
I was like radio, TV, video games. I'm like, yeah, where do I sign up for that?
That was my intuitiveness picking up on that, by the way.
Your big statement though, and
Mhm.
you've got this program that's out with it is don't limit them, don't limit you. Can you describe that to the audience?
I will. I will. And so every single one of us, whether we're an entrepreneur, a leader, even my own podcast was whether you're a leader at home or in the boardroom, as we show up, the people we're leading someone, whether it be, like I said, at home or in the boardroom, we're all leading someone. And we can only lead them to the extent that we grow. So if we're stuck, if we're stressed, if our relationships are falling apart or things are going on, our health, on and on, we're not taking very good care of ourselves. And we can't lead a team to excellence or even further than we go. So we need to always look at that. So if there's something going on in our businesses or at work or at home, we always need to turn around and look at, okay, where am I stopping myself? It's about going within when depending on what's going on outside. So don't limit, we're limiting other people by limiting ourselves.
Yeah, and John actually speaks of that in Law of the Lid. And
Yeah.
of course the latest book he dropped was No Limits. But I have this conversation with my family a lot, especially as I've been on this journey over the last 3 or 4 years, that I tell them that my brain is like a golf swing. And if there's something going on at the house with them, or I'm upset or something like that, then I'm just a half an inch off in my swing, right? Which is the difference to hook, slice, or hitting a nice shot. And that I've got to get that swing straight. Is that what you're kind of talking to here as well?
Yeah, you're looking at the outside going, okay, there's something within me that needs to change. And nothing else, you can't get that straight shot until you pivot in the right direction and look within and go the right way. So absolutely, it's saying the same thing in golf terms, which I love too.
There you go. So as you work with leaders and executives, what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing in today's workplace?
So for me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing are, number one, leaders, CEOs, executives, whatever, they're not looking at the whole person as a person, as a holistic being. They're like, you come in and you do your job and you get out. A lot of times they don't want them to leave. They want them to work themselves to death. And I'll tell you more stories about that later. But so they're not letting, we're mind, body, spirits. We're these 3-part plus more actually beings that I'll talk about too later. But we're ignoring we want their physical body at work, but we're ignoring their spirit. We're ignoring, business leaders are ignoring that spiritual part. And that's where, if you really look at the top leaders of this world, Mark, I'm going to say Mark Zuckerberg, skyrocketed, Steve Jobs with Apple. They all had a spiritual person that guided them, whether it be for long term or short term. They were able to excel in how they were, and also excel for their teams, help their teams excel, because they sought outside help in a spiritual advisor.
And I'll leave the Steve Jobs comment alone, and it's more a comedy routine. I heard it. I don't know if you've heard Bill Burr.
No, go for it.
If you've ever heard Bill Burr talk about him, I just saw this the other day and it cracked me up. And he was like, Steve didn't create anything. He just drove everybody else to create it. Then he's the only one standing up there by himself.
But it's true.
Funny. It was very tongue in cheek, but very, very
It's
funny.
kind of true. Yeah.
But so the spirituality side, how does that affect both personal and professional lives? Like what advantages can we get from really diving into some of these things that you talk about?
Right. So let's think about that. If we forget about our spirit, which the majority of the world has, we ignore that we're actually spiritual beings, that we're that first and foremost before we're even a physical body. We ignore that. What happens is a lot of times we end up not taking care of ourselves in the proper way. So we ignore our connection with ourselves, then we start ignoring our connection with other people, let alone our connection with God. And then we have the struggles in our relationships. Again, we're ignoring that. We don't know how to connect at a deep level. All we know is the surface stuff. And then, our health takes nosedives because, and yes, these are all spiritual reasons. Our teams can't move up because people are exhausted. They're exhausted from working all the time. They come home, they've got families to take, people who are, we live in such a stressful world. It's so chaotic. And if we can't take that 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day to ourselves, to reconnect to ourselves and to our spirit, to our spiritual self, we lose ourselves. We lose who we are. We lose our relationships. We don't know how to show up. We don't know how to show up. We don't know how. We're exhausted. And it's just this rabbit hole of on and on and on. And you talk about work-life balance, and that's why many of us are becoming our own bosses, our own CEOs and entrepreneurs, because we're tired. We're tired of the corporate circle in pushing us to work, do all the time. And that is not what we are here on earth to do.
Yeah. In fact, I met with a friend yesterday and he gave me a term that I'd never heard before, but he said PID. He goes, their PID quotient is out of control. And I was like, what is that? He goes, well, that's when you progressively become institutionally dumb. And you
Right?
you basically are conforming to a corporate life and forgetting what it's like. And so therefore, your decisions that you're making, how you're pushing people, all those different things, you've been institutionalized. You don't recognize, right? You see, the term that kills me is you see people as resources, right? That
Yes.
one,
Yeah.
and we even call it human resources. It's not, no, they're people. They're people first. They'll always be people.
Yeah, people first. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we created the show right for the work-life balance.
I can't do that.
Siri wants to step in.
There's joining in. Sorry, I can't do that.
But we created this show specifically to tackle work-life balance issues, to remember and to remind executives that when you come up with an arbitrary date, there's no reason why. You're literally making people choose whether or not to go to their son or daughter's, soccer game or birthday party, or just, again, go to the cats.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what it is that you're doing that, but they forget that part.
They forget that part. And the more the corporations drive down their employees, the less productive they get. They don't understand that they need time to work out. They need time to connect with themselves and their family and on and on. I just hear stories over and over about, people going to their bosses and saying, hey, I need a break, and we don't have time. There's no time. You got to be here. We need you.
Yeah.
They would replace you in 5 minutes. And nowadays, it didn't used to be like that, but it is now.
Oh yeah. You're a number, right? You're an employee number.
Right. Yeah.
So what I really want to be able to do is get into why this topic is so important to you, but we're right up against a break. So we're going to go ahead and take that break right here. You're listening to the Work-Life Balance with Rick Morris.
Now back to the work-life balance.
See, that lead-in music always gets me going, and of course, I've told the story behind it several times. It's a group that I help produce and manage called The Party, and so the big announcement that came out with them is that that one of the party members, Jason Hampton, and I are the official executive producers of the Mickey Mouse Club reunion, which is going to happen in May now in Orlando. So you can go to mmcreunion.com, I believe is the web address, and find out all the details there. We'd love to see you guys in Orlando. Back to Lara Jaye. So Lara, right before break, we started to tease this story in, but why is this the whole intuitive executive coaching and the spirituality side of it? Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I wish I could say that it was an easy reason, something fun to do. But I come from a really long line of entrepreneurs, great grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, brothers, myself, all of us, very successful in the worldly view. But what I learned was you're only a success when you're working or when you're making money. And it was definitely about working. No time to rest, no time to just be. It was all about do. And then the second thing I learned growing up was scotch on the rocks with a twist. So alcohol was the main food group in my house. Peace at all costs, walk around pins and needles. And I learned that when you're stressed, what you do is you numb yourself. And isn't that what we do here in the world? When you're stressed, you numb yourself. So fast forward 25 years, I was living the picture perfect life with my husband and 2 great kids, successful marketing company because I worked all the time. Fabulous vacations, beautiful home, pillar of the community, and more. But on the inside, I was literally dying. Organs were shutting down. I was very sick. I was struggling with a very, very deep depression, major health crisis, end of my 25-year marriage, hated myself, becoming an empty nester, so saying goodbye to my kiddos. I was just exhausted. And even as a pillar of the community and CEO, I couldn't find help anywhere. And I struggled to navigate these. And I just was seeking and searching. And long story short with that, I finally had to create the person that I wanted, but easier said than done. Of course, it took a while. And while I was going through that, I have such a deep desire to see corporations, all sizes, treat their team members fairly. So part of it was my fault, was my husband and I's fault, and work all the time. And I know I was not sleeping at night, and because I put work first. I put it even before my kids. There were a couple nights I forgot to make dinner because I had to get work done. That pressure that we put on ourselves. And I see corporations doing this and not allowing room for their employees, their team members to grow, and certainly not encouraging them to lead a holistic life, that encompasses all areas of their life. They're just worried about their bottom line. And so besides my husband and I both work, and then we lost, we lost our health, or I did, lost my health, I lost my family, you lose all that stuff as you do that. But I also, a couple years too down the road, then had to fly across the country and get my I think he was 22 at the time, my son, out of the hospital from having a seizure at his corporation in Miami. He's a video game programmer in Miami, and they were having him work 7 days a week. And they did this about 2 months in a row to release a game. Now we're talking a video game here. This is not, life or death, but that's the stress. And his boss called me and he said, take as much time as you need, but nothing's going to change here. So I spent 10 days with a catatonic son over having to work all the time. And that gets you thinking, okay, things need to change. This is not right for our kids. It's one thing when it was happening to me, but when you do it to my kids, don't mess with me, right? Yeah. So that was really what catapulted me into going after seeing my, I saw it all in me, but finally seeing it go through my son, I was like, this is not okay. And this is about work-life balance and taking care of ourselves. And companies just they're trying, and sometimes they sugarcoat it a little and they have all the fun stuff there, but then still don't give them time to do it, So, but part of it's our responsibility. It is all of our responsibility in standing up and asking for it.
Yeah. And so we have very similar stories. I was lucky enough to pull out of the depression before it got to that point, but it was at that point, all right, losing the house, losing the family.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because I speak a lot on executives. You're doing the same, but we were executives. I am an executive. I'm a CEO of my organization. Mm-hmm. And it's always amazing to me that it takes something like that for us to wake up, right? I wrote a book called No Day But Today, trying to get people to think about, why do we have to wait for the diagnosis? Why do we have to wait for the car accident in order for us to start living the lives that we really want to live? Exactly. And I challenge project managers, because I feel like project managers have a lot more say than they allow. And I come from a project management background, but the first question I get when I get a project is, why this date? Like, who came up with this date? What if
Right.
this date's not possible? Who's going to die?
The pressure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and so it's really amazing to me to hear that. What were some of the steps that you took to start to kind of pull out? Like, what was one of the
Yeah, I
first?
know. I jumped from one thing to another, didn't I? So yeah, I started writing. I was completely, pretty much bedridden on most days. I was that sick, and I didn't know what was wrong. I ended up finding out later I had an autoimmune disease, but it wasn't until a couple of years later. So along with depression. So while I was bedridden, and I would crawl from the bed to the couch just to say I got up for the day, and that was my being productive. At that point, I had to sell my marketing company, and I really couldn't do anything but sit there and stare out the window. And so I did a couple things. Number one, I started writing as a way to heal. I had to when we're stressed, we have all of these stuck emotions in our body, and we don't know it. We know, I knew organs were shutting down. I wasn't feeling good, but I wasn't paying any attention. But this forced me. And that's what, like, it's the pain that forces us to stop and go, oh, I probably should do things a little different. So I started to write as a way to heal. And that was my first book that came out. And it took me a year to write it, because I was learning while I was writing it, my steps. And those will be the steps actually in the book that I'll share later, that for all of us to use to really tap into to our health and to who we are as a holistic being. But the second thing I did was try to find something inside of my body. I started to meditate and prayer. For me, prayer is when we're doing all the talking, and meditation is when I finally shut up and can hear what God's trying to say to me. And that's the intuitive part. So before I would pray, but it was always me talking. And now it's okay. Now I can learn to be quiet and actually listen to what God's trying to say to me. And I would sit there for days, hours, weeks, and try to hear what he wanted to say. And then I would write it out, and that ended up being the books. But I would basically, we all have a soul, obviously, and I would ask myself, is there anything in my body that even wants to be here anymore? I would, when you're depressed, you're depressed. You can't reach out, and we think, well, why didn't they just reach out? Like, we can't. When you're that depressed, you shut down. But I knew, I was like, why am I even here? I'm so miserable. Like, and I'm making everyone else miserable. But I would just kind of sit there quietly and meditate and ask myself, okay, is there anything inside of my body that wants to be here? And I would see, I'm very visual, and I would see like this little tiny flicker. For me, it was in my stomach area. So it was like a flicker of hope, or I almost called it my first book, The Spark of Hope, but it was trademarked, so I couldn't. But couldn't do that. So anyway, it was really, literally was my spark of hope. That was the little tiny flicker, and as I focused on it, it would expand. And as we know, what we focus on, what expands. So I would focus on it, and I'm like, wow, so there is something here that wants to be alive. Okay. So I would focus on it, and it grew, and I got stronger and stronger every single day. And the other thing that happened when I got quiet is mind chatter, right? Well, here comes all the mind chatter, and I could hear all the horrible things I was telling myself. No wonder I was so miserable, because of these crazy things I was telling myself. And then I realized, hey, if I can tell myself all these horrible things, how about if I switch it? We have scientific studies, change what like the radio station. So I would turn the channel. I would start saying more positive things. I would write out affirmations, which sometimes worked, sometimes didn't, but they did work when I would actually feel them in my body. And that was the part of it that makes affirmations really stick. And so when I started getting still, listening to that mind chatter and meditating, praying, of course, and we're just really opening up to that, it was a whole new world for me.
Yeah, Shazad Charmaine wrote a beautiful book called Positive Intelligence, talking about your mind chatter and the judge, right? And how
Yes.
quickly, like the first person that'll tell you can't do something is you.
Right. We're the
Right.
only ones who limit ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You also reminded me of another saying where people talk about where the intuition's coming from. And again, you can call it your source or whatever, but that's where the guy's saying, please God, help me find a parking spot. Please God. No worry. I found one. Thanks. Right. It's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute.
Right.
Right. You got to
Wait a
pay
minute.
attention to where the information's
Yes.
coming from.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, first of all, we'd like to thank you for being very vulnerable and raw with the
Yeah.
story. I think that helps.
Yeah.
Certainly, the listeners understand that it doesn't matter what phase of life you are. People attach so much to, if I have the house, if I have the job, if I have the
Yeah.
family, if I am a pillar of the community, then I'll be happy. And
Then no. Yeah.
yeah, it increases the complexity of happiness, I think, is what it does. The
It
higher
really
the,
does, Rick. Yeah. And that's partly what I talk about is, on my website, you'll see over and over, we've got it all, but we're still not happy because we have that, I call it spiritual bankruptcy, where
yeah.
we could have money in the bank, but we're spiritually bankrupt.
And in fact, it's again, I teach my kids debits and credits, man. You got a big relationship bank
Absolutely.
with me, right? But if it's
Yeah.
just always withdrawing at some point, right,
Mhm.
it's going to bankrupt. So I think this is a good place. What I'd like to do when we come back, though, is start to get into what it is that you tell executives. How have you
Yeah.
taken that experience of your life and flip
Yeah.
that to start to become a servant leader and help others overcome what you've gone through? So we're going to do that when we come back from the break. We'll be right back with Lara Jaye. You're listening to Rick Morris on the
Work-life
Work-Life
balance.
And we are back for the third segment of the Work-Life Balance on this Friday afternoon. We're very thankful that you guys are listening along live out there. Of course, we've got our Zoom chat up, so if you want to see us as we talk, you can certainly do that. The video of this will be posted on YouTube by tomorrow, and of course, the podcast is available on iTunes or Android, all the wonderful places everywhere. Just search the Work-Life Balance. You can even tell Alexa to play the latest version of the Work-Life Balance, and she'll do so. So coming back with Lara Jaye. So Lara, again, I can't thank you enough for being so vulnerable with the story, because I think that really, we were even just talking on the break, that I really think that it benefits people, even if they're at this point now. So how did you take all of that and everything that was going on, and you started to make that switch? How do you help executives and other people now, knowing what you know?
Yeah. So several different ways. One is I start with meeting with them one-on-one. And that is when the work that we do one-on-one helps them reconnect to themselves. And what I kept seeing with executives is that their hearts were broken. I was like, God, what is that about? Are they they're heartbroken over love? I don't understand. And it's not that kind of, their heart is broken in that they're not tapping into their heart. A lot of the people that I help, a lot of, especially the men, are in their head. And I don't work with just women. I actually work with more men than I do women. And we do many of us just stay in our heads. And my goal isn't just to say you have to, lead from the heart. It's marry all of it, because it's all important. We need to, intellectually bring to the table along with the heart, just like, like you mentioned, human resources, they're people. So, that's the difference. It's putting the heart in there. So, so when I work with the executives one-on-one, that's where we start. And we start with, and actually I do a lot of energy work and healing and intuitive. So we start with going, okay, where are you stuck? What's really going on, or maybe there isn't a problem and you're making one up, which does happen sometimes, because many of us are such perfectionists in these leadership roles. There really could be nothing wrong. We're the only ones stopping us. The belief that there's something wrong. So we got to look at that. And so I start with that, and we go from there. They a lot of times want to bring me into the company, into meetings if I intuitively need to, if they need help with an employee. I act almost as a counselor in some ways, although that's not what my degree is. But it's about learning, once they can learn to tap into it themselves, you know, my goal is to be done with them as fast as possible, which isn't a great business model, but it is important because they need to learn to do this on themselves. I can't always, I am their secret weapon, but I'm not their crutch. You know, they can do this themselves. I want to open up their intuitiveness and teach them how to lead with their heart and their head, to marry all of it and move forward with it. So, you know, the bottom line is for them to follow their own GPS. And so I teach them how to do that, and especially help them for the people, a lot of them are in pain. Sometimes they're in emotional pain, and it may or may not come out yet as physical. And I help them with all of that. So we start there and then go from there.
So do you have a methodology that you follow, or are you relying on your own intuition based on that?
I kind of I listen to what each person, you know, is so different. So, you know, sometimes I'm working with people who are alcoholic, and the alcohol, there's some that is controlling their life. So they can't really move forward until we get that out of their life. Or maybe they're recovering alcoholic, or there's something and but they still, you know, they still resonate with it. So we have to work through whatever. And that's where working with a coach is, you take where you're at right here and go, okay, I want to go over here. How do I get there? You know that. How do we get to point B? You know, what's the bridge to get there? And so I work with them that way and intuitively. But I look at it in all the different ways. I look at all the different, all their different energy centers. Where are they blocked? Where are they stuck? Where are they at with their relationships, their health? So all of these different ways that I teach are, number one is being still. Like, I can't do this work for them. I can teach it to them, but we all, like, great, you know, we all have to do this work eventually for ourselves, right? Yeah. And so my number one step is always to be still. We have to slow down, right? When you were going through your depression, you had to take a lot more time for yourself, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That had to be number one, especially, and of course too, you needed the time to write your book. But so my number one thing is always to start with 5 minutes a day to pray and meditate. If you're not taking that time now, start there. And then we got to go into the meditation and mind chatter and mindfulness. And because when we get quiet, then here comes all the mind chatter, right? Here comes all the mind chatter, and you shouldn't be doing that and all of that. So then thirdly, then meditation and mindfulness. Now, a lot of people use those words interchangeably. For me, meditation is a form of mindfulness. Mindfulness to me is bringing in your five senses. So while we're sitting here, we are, you know, connected in almost all the ways, except I can see you. I can't smell you, but I can see you. You know, we need to bring it. Yeah, you never know.
The power of the internet.
The power of the internet. Yeah, it's about bringing in that. So then, so being still, looking at the mind in all those different ways. And then, of course, our physical body. I work with them on, you know, sometimes it's nutrition, and sometimes it's whatever it is with their physical body. Maybe it's a lot of the women executives, we're still all trying to do it all. We're still trying to have these perfect dinners on the table at 6:00, and, you know, for our families, and because we want to do it all, and it's just not happening. So, okay, well, how can we, you know, take that pressure off ourselves, you know, and still feed ourselves nutritionally the way, what is it that we need physically and for our body. So not just our own physical body, but also our physical space. Like, what's your space look like? Don't you notice the difference, Rick, versus when you're in a cluttered room versus not?
Yeah.
Like, do you have that? Yeah.
It's always cluttered for me, but sure. Yeah.
That's okay. So at least you admit it, right? That's the first step.
It's organized chaos. I know where everything is, just nobody else does.
That's all that matters. So you're funny. So for our physicality part, we have to look at our spaces, do you feel good when you walk in a room? Have you ever walked in a room and just went, yeah, like it just kind of like choked you, and I don't want to be here. Maybe it's a party, or maybe it, so all of these things, being still, mind, body. And then of course the spiritual route, looking at the different spiritual points of their reconnecting themselves. And sometimes it's about letting go of our past religious experiences, maybe things that have been hard on us, that kind of thing. And then a couple of areas that a lot of times we don't especially talk about as leaders are emotions, especially emotions and energy. So those are my main things that I teach to every single person that I work with, about to take care of themselves in a holistic way.
The person, and I guess it gets frustrating for a lot of people, but the person has got to be ready to go there.
They do.
Do you help bridge that gap?
I do. And sometimes that's just, they're only ready for 1 or 2 sessions. And then I may not see them for a couple more months until, okay, maybe it's more pain that's come in, and sometimes it takes that relationship to crash, unfortunately, or the health, some kind of health issue, something to get their attention, to go, things are just not how I want them. And I think part of it is, we have to remember that, again, as I've mentioned, that we're responsible. We are responsible for our lives and how we show up and what shows up. And until we, stop feeling sorry for ourselves and go, okay, what can I think differently? What can I believe differently? How can I show up differently? And then get the help that we need. And we have to humble ourselves. We have to humble ourselves to get that help. And that's the hardest. That's a hard part.
My transition over time, it hit me like a brick wall. It was several years ago, but I'm somewhat of a pack rat. I kind of keep everything that I had. And I remember one of my first professional jobs, I just kept getting passed over for promotion. Had no idea why at the time. I found some of those emails that I had written back then, and I wouldn't let anybody work for me or around me who put in the email what I was doing. It was so apparently clear to me why I was getting passed over for promotions. And what's interesting is once that awareness starts to happen, you start to become more aware in all aspects, all phases of your life. It's not just the spiritual awakening or just a health awakening. It is an awakening in general. We got about 2 minutes before break. But what are those breakthroughs that you're looking for in people where you kind of look at them and go, you're ready for this. You're ready.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. But first, but we might have to talk about that when we come back from break, because I really want to expand more on that word awareness that you use.
Perfect. Go ahead.
And the awareness, and it starts with being still, right? Until we get quiet, our soul's screaming at us all the time. And until we get quiet, can we start noticing or becoming aware of our thoughts, of all the things that we're projecting onto other people, and how we're showing up in the world, or what's showing up in the world for us. You're right. It all starts with that awareness and noticing. And sometimes just that fixes it. Not always, and usually not, but a lot of times it does for the simpler things. So it's very important.
I couldn't agree more. So we're going to have one more segment with Lara when we come back, but we're going to go ahead and take our final break here. You're listening to the Work-Life Balance with Rick
Now
Morris.
back to the Work-Life Balance.
And we are back for our final segment of the Work-Life Balance on this Friday afternoon. We've been meeting with Lara Jaye. And so, Lara, really quickly, is there anything else that you kind of wish you had covered that we didn't have an opportunity to do so far?
Let's see. Well, I want to say that this work, Rick, what you're doing is so important in getting out to the world and for your listeners. And thank you for letting me be a part of it. But it's so important that, like, as we ended talking about noticing and being aware and just really taking that time for ourselves. And I think that we, and especially in America, don't take the time for ourselves to take care of ourselves in all of these different ways, because it is work that 4-letter word, we put first. We put it before our families. We put it before our kids' baseball games and things like that. And I just want to say that we need to take some time and regroup as individuals and take the responsibility back into our hands and tell the corporations that this is not okay. Like, I'm a person. We only have so much energy in our bodies in every single day in order to give. And I'm going to give you all I can, but I also need to take care of myself in these other ways. And we're more productive. We can keep our families and our relationships then, and not be so bankrupt in so many areas.
I love that you said that. It was a big thing for me in I'll tell a really quick story, but I was consultant with Xerox and GE. I was given this assignment. We had this big trip planned as a family. And of course the go live date was right in the middle of that vacation. Oh, you can't go. So we moved the vacation. Of course, the project slides right back into it. You got to move it. And I was like, man, if I'd have just kept the original dates, then we would have been fine. We could have done the vacation. I'd have been back. And so I've just learned to say no. And
exactly.
People are, well, I really need you. I can appreciate that. I'm not available until Wednesday. It is what it is. And it's amazingly freeing when you can really believe in that.
And the world doesn't stop, right?
Nobody died. Nobody died when we missed that go live date.
No big deal. Right?
So how do people get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah, they can find me my website, larajay.com. It's LARAJAYE.com. Would love to hear from them. And they can download my Don't Limit You ebook, and it's amazing.
Yep, and you supplied that to me. We read that as part of the research. And I'm be honest and forthcoming, I forwarded it to a couple of friends.
Awesome, thank you.
But finally, too, one of the questions that we ask all of our guests is, what's some of the best advice you've ever received?
That's a great question. So I have, as a coach, I also have coaches who have helped me see my limits and break through barriers. I have and what I want to say are 2 sentences that 2 different coaches have told me, and I've put them together and I use them and almost every morning. And one of them is to wake up and say, I love my life. Whether you can barely get out of bed, whether your body's in pain, whatever, still say, I love my life. And the second sentence is say, I wonder how much better my life can get. So by saying those 2 things, I love my life and I wonder how much better my life can get, God's going to show up and go, well, let me show you how much better it can get. And of course you love your life. Look how much better it can get. It's kind of the theory, when you get a new car and it's a certain color and all of a sudden that's all you see. Yep. So it's this scientific theory, whatever it is, I don't even know.
Well, that was the basis of The Secret. There's advanced attraction. There's several things that say the same thing, but it's true, right? You never see that car or that color until you decide you want it.
Right. So remember, I love my life and I wonder how much better it can get.
And I'll give you a quick anecdote from John on that. John, when he was doing his seminars at his church, not his sermons, not seminars, mixing things though. What he would do is like once a quarter, go ahead and announce all the titles, but he hadn't written them yet. And then he would have folders for each one. And as he read and as he did his kind of daily routine, he would find things that fit the announcement of the sermon. And when it was time to write, he could open up a folder. There'd be 12 quotes in there and off you go.
That's a perfect example. He made the container. So we're making the container and then God shows up. All right, you're ready for it. Let's fill it in.
And there's something you glanced over that I want to come back to that I think is so important, because it's one of the questions I ask anybody I really am interested in when I hear they're a coach, is who coaches you? And right, and you find those that are like, I mean, I'm coaching you. I don't need a coach. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work out, right?
No.
So I love the fact that you referenced that, because I had such a negative perception, and I know like I'm in the 90 percentile of that when you hear, I'm going to hire a coach or you need to talk to a coach, right? Immediately you're like, what's a coach going to teach me, man?
Yeah,
Right?
what's a coach going to teach me, right? Yeah.
Right, and that's the biggest misperception. Is coach isn't teaching you anything; it's helping you find the answers within yourself. Right? It's
Exactly.
so important. But I think
Yes.
it's incredibly important that we experience that for ourselves as people who label ourselves as coaches, to make sure that we do that.
Absolutely.
So, for those
Yeah.
people that are interested in coaching, there's tons of great ones out there. Please reach out to Lara, but also ask that question. If you bump into somebody and they want to pour into your lives, right? The first question is, who's coaching you?
Who's coaching you? I
Yeah.
love that.
There you go. There you go. So, Lara, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Really
Awesome.
appreciate you sharing. And please visit her website. Again, it's LARAJAYE.com. And go get that free book. Again, I've read it. It's fantastic. Coming up on the show next week, I'll be doing a show solo. So whatever's in my heart is what's going to pour out. But you guys are well used to that. But we'll be doing that from the Keystone chapter in Pennsylvania of PMI, as I'm speaking at their event on Friday and Saturday next week. The week following that, we're going to be at Leader Shifts with John Maxwell. So we'll see if we can't pull off a live show with some of the people that are going to be there with us. And the week following is open at the moment. So we'll see how that goes. But I appreciate you guys. I love you guys listening. Please reach out to me at Rick A. Morris on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. Email is rick@rickamorris.com or rmorris@rsquareconsulting.com. And until next week, we hope that you pursue that work-life balance that you desire. We'll talk to everybody next week.
All right, you're clear.
Thank you for joining us this week. The Work-Life Balance with Rick Morris can be heard live every Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time and 5 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel. Now that the weekend is here, it's time to rethink your priorities and enjoy it. We'll see you on our next show.